Have you ever run into a bully years later? How did it go? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe, and I'd really appreciate it if you leave a like and comment something related to the topic. Let's begin. Story 1. Actually, one of the kids who used to pick on me the worst in grade school ended up becoming one of my best friends after several years without contact. Our first meeting after all those years, in a bar, went something like this. Him. Yeah, sorry about that. Kind of a dick move on my part. Me. Kids are assholes. It happens. Him. Cool. Let's drink. Another bully, incidentally, once sent me a random Facebook message out of the blue, apologizing for his behavior because he felt he owed some kind of karmic debt. Story 2. I was never bullied, and I wasn't the bully either. I was the guy who had friends in every group, from the jocks to the geeks. Middle and high school were great for me. I was really lucky. However, I did have a friend who was bullied relentlessly. I was always backing him up and pulling him out of trouble. To be honest, he was a little slow, but he had the biggest heart in the world. His last name was really odd, and that didn't help him at all. Anyway, I hadn't seen him for about 20 years. I was training some guys in a big city and walking down the sidewalk when I heard, "Hey, reduced fat GIF. Hey man." I turned around to see a well-dressed monster of a dude, about 6 feet 5 inches, 250 pounds or more, running across the street toward me. Built like a brick house, wearing a high-end suit and tie, looking like a CEO. I just stood there trying to place him. He reached me, stuck out his hand, and said, "It's me, full fat GIF." I couldn't believe my eyes. The guy looked like a damn Adonis. Back in high school, he was as awkward as they came. Covered in zits, skinny as a rail, sick all the time, just having a rough go at life. Turns out they had him on all kinds of messed up medications as a kid, and it really screwed him up. We grabbed a couple of drinks at the corner pub and caught up right there. It turns out he got really lucky during the dot-com boom, cashed out, and now he's living the good life. By old school, I mean he started another go-go company and was in the middle of a venture capital push to secure more funds. He even gave me a standing offer to come work for him if I ever wanted to move. Sometimes things really do come full circle. Karma pays off. I was genuinely stunned and happy to see how completely his life had turned around once they got him off those meds. Story 3. This actually happened to me. Back in elementary school, a kid punched me in the chest. It was around 2nd grade, but I never forgot it. Apparently, he didn't either. When I was about 16, I ran into him at a local minor league game. The moment I saw him, I had a flashback to that day. I said hi, asked how he'd been, and then he said, "Do you remember that time I punched you in Ms. Woody's class?" I replied, "Yeah, actually I do." Then he completely blew my mind by saying, "That was a shitty thing for me to do, and I want you to punch me back right now. I deserve it." Now, adult me would have said no and just accepted the apology. But 16-year-old me thought that sounded like an excellent idea. I agreed and punched him square in the chest. It hurt him a bit. Instantly, I felt like a huge asshole. All of a sudden, I was the bully. I'd sunk to the level he was at back in 2nd grade. With that one punch, he became the bigger man. I immediately apologized, and he accepted. Then we went our separate ways. I really think I learned a couple of life lessons in that moment. People grow up, and revenge isn't always sweet. Story 4. A kid 2 years older than me used to pick on me all the time growing up. He was always bigger than me. We went to school together from kindergarten through high school. I guess we got along at times, but for the most part, he was a bully. Years later, during my first year of college, we had a house party and he showed up, which I wasn't too happy about. I knew the bastard would steal something. The next day, I couldn't find my jacket, and I was sure he'd taken it. The jacket was special to me because my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, had bought it for me. A couple of weeks later, I was at the mall with a friend and saw him wearing it. I guess he hadn't realized that since elementary school, I'd grown quite a bit, about 6 feet 0 inches and 180 pounds, while he was around 5 feet 6 inches and maybe 160. I walked right up to him and said bluntly, "Give me my fucking jacket." He just stared at me and tried to brush it off, saying something like, "This is mine, I bought it." For context, it was a small town in backwoods Canada, and it was an Old Navy jacket. There wasn't an Old Navy within 300 miles. I told him again, "Give it to me." Now, he slowly took it off and handed it over. As he did, I said, "Yeah, that's right." And he gave an awkward little chuckle. Then I just turned around and walked away. Best part? His girlfriend was standing there the entire time, watching. Story 5. When I was in 6th grade, this girl used to rag on me really hard for reading Shakespeare and being nerdy. She was awful all through school. Then I went to boarding school and finally came out of my shell. Fast forward to my 2nd year of college. One of my best guy friends called and asked if I could sell him a little weed because this girl, who was trying to hook up with him, wanted to get high. Being the kind and curious friend I am, I said sure, bring her by and have my roommate let you in. When I got home and walked into my room, this girl was sitting on my bed. I just stood there staring at her. She immediately started talking really fast, acting like it was so great to see me, all fake smiles and small talk. I just looked at Jacob and said, "Get this bitch out of my house." He looked at me, then at her, and said, "Well, she drove, so I'll just stay over tonight. She can leave. Begone, witch." And she left. We got high and played Mario Kart while she called him crying, begging him to come hang out with her. Story 6. Funny you should bring that up. I was a pretty good kid, not a fighter at all. I'm in my mid-30s now. In 7th grade, there was this loud, annoying bully who usually ignored me, but one day he shoved me backward into his friend, who was kneeling behind me waiting to trip me. Not expecting the sudden attack, I went over his friend and smashed my head on the ground. I told him he was a dick and pretty much hated that prick for the rest of middle school. Cut to 3 years later, he dies in a car accident. It didn't make me feel good in the slightest, but it was weird to hear that someone who'd been such an asshole for no reason died such a tragic death. Then in high school, there was this long-haired douche, he went to a different school, who tried to fight me, only to be pulled off by a passing adult. While being dragged away, he shouted that he was going to kill me. For the next 6 months, I was terrified that this guy was going to stab me or something. I never ran into him again. Fast forward several years, I'm working at a downtown gym, putting myself through college, and who walks in? That same guy? As fate would have it, I was now taller than him and easily 50 pounds heavier. We exchanged looks, he got sheepish, and I said, "Hey, remember that time you said you were going to kill me?" He looked down, embarrassed, and said, "Yeah, man, sorry about that. I was such a dick back then." We both laughed. About 6 months later, I saw in the paper that he died in a car accident with his wife. I was genuinely sad. Funny you should bring that up. I was a pretty good kid, not a fighter at all. I'm in my mid-30s now. In 7th grade, there was this loud, annoying bully who usually ignored me, but once he shoved me backward into his friend, who was kneeling behind me waiting to trip me. Not expecting it, I went over and smashed my head on the ground. I told him he was a dick and pretty much hated that guy for the rest of middle school. Cut to 3 years later, he dies in a car accident. It didn't make me feel good, but it was strange hearing that someone who'd been such an asshole for no reason died such a tragic death. Then in high school, there was this long-haired jerk, he went to another school, who tried to fight me, only to be pulled off by a passing adult. While being dragged away, he shouted that he was going to kill me. For the next 6 months, I was terrified he'd stab me or something. I never saw him again. Fast forward a few years. I'm working at a downtown gym, putting myself through college, and who walks in? That same guy? As fate would have it, I was now taller and about 50 pounds heavier. We exchanged looks, he got sheepish, and I said, "Hey, remember that time you said you were going to kill me?" He looked down, embarrassed, and said, "Yeah, man, sorry about that. I was such a dick back then." We both laughed. About 6 months later, I saw in the paper that he died in a car accident with his wife. I was genuinely sad. Story 7. I was really popular early on in school until one day when this girl went around telling all of my friends that I hated them. Apparently, that was enough to earn me 8 years of being teased and ignored by a class of only about 70 kids. After that, things got pretty rough. The worst thing those kids did to me, led by that same girl, was tell their parents that my dad abused me, which caused a whirlwind of police drama for my family for absolutely no reason. Anyway, I go to church once a year for my grandma's sake, and I guess that girl just happened to be there. She came up to me and apologized. She said she'd turned everyone against me because, at the time, everyone ignored her and she was jealous of my looks and popularity. I was honestly just shocked that anyone would even care about that stuff at that age. I wish I could say I was vindictive and did something really cool, but I didn't. I never really got my revenge. We exchanged Facebooks, and it sounds like she's having a pretty rough life as it is. Despite all the teasing I went through, I actually feel kind of bad for ex-bullies. I think people underestimate how awful it must feel to know you've caused someone else pain. Story 8. Recently, I was called a bully because I wanted my personal dishes washed after my roommate used them. For months, she would come home, cook her own meals, and then leave the dirty dishes on the stove for me to find when I got back later. After about 2 months of this, I told her that if she kept doing it, I'd ban her from using my dishes. 2 weeks later, I followed through and told her she was no longer allowed to use them. She called me a bitch behind my back, locked herself in her room for the next 4 months, and eventually moved out. I later tried to reach out to clear the air, since we shared some mutual friends, but she never responded, so I gave up. Fast forward 2 years, I saw her again this year at E3. I was sitting at a table with friends when she came around the corner alone with her food. Our eyes met, and she immediately started walking backward around the corner, keeping eye contact with me the entire time. It was the weirdest thing ever, like something straight out of a movie. I even tried contacting her again afterward, just to let her know I wasn't going to be rude and that she had no reason to be afraid of me. I told her I actually wished she'd come over to say hi. 3 months later, still no response. Not that I expected much. She was always kind of odd to begin with. She was 23 years old and couldn't even say vagina or penis because she considered them no-no words. Instead, she called them boy and girl PP parts. Story 9. Yes, I went to high school with a guy who was viciously antagonistic. Not so much a physical bully, but the kind who constantly mocked anyone he thought was beneath him in the social hierarchy. Cruel, non-stop mockery. You just knew that every time you passed him in the hallway, you'd hear the same insults, the same crap, over and over. About 10 years later, I pulled into my car dealership to get some service done. The guy who came out to greet me had a very familiar face. I wondered if it could be him. The name tag didn't have his real name, just something generic like buddy or pal. As I walked toward the desk, I kept trying to figure out if it was really him. Then I saw it, his hand. He had a very distinct birth defect on one of his hands, and that's when I knew for sure. I didn't say a word about it, but I definitely savored every second of him calling me sir, offering me coffee, and asking if I needed a ride to work. Story 10. I wasn't going to post, thinking I'd just come off as a winner, but after reading other people's stories I thought I'd share mine. There's a little advice at the end too. I never fit into a group. I wasn't smart enough to be a nerd. I wasn't big enough to be a jock. I wasn't goth, stoner, waver, punk, long hair, prep, or any of the cliquey types. I was just me, and I had friends from a few different cliques. Grade 8 is where it started, and it didn't stop until grade 10. It didn't take long for the bullies to figure out who the pacifist was and that he wouldn't fight back. Not more than a month into the first year of high school, and they'd all come to beat on me. I stopped taking the bus because of one fellow who lived in my neighborhood. He'd beat me up at the bus stop or sit behind me and punch me on the way to school. A few of the football players had it in for me as well. In gym class, our teacher usually wouldn't show up until 10 minutes after the bell rang. During that time, I would be held down on the wooden gym floor while the resident fat ass threw his weight on me. They called it splashing. I called it painful. While I was held down, sometimes they'd put one foot in my crotch and see how much pressure they could apply before I threw up or cried. Sometimes they weren't as patient and would just kick. I remember once one of the bullies cornered me by himself in the bathroom. He pushed me around, punched me 2 or 3 times. I finally decided to fight back. I punched the asshole hard enough to give him a bleeding nose, and while he was holding it, I walked out. He and 4 other friends found me at lunch. Each one held an arm or leg while Bloody Nose grabbed me by the hair and smashed my head into a window ledge until I was unconscious. One of the other bullies was a little fireplug of a guy, 5 feet 2 inches if he was lucky and pretty pudgy. He would punch, kick, or just run his mouth until his victim decided to fight back. Then his Andre the Giant-sized friend would step in. It was never pretty after that. One day, while heading to the local 7-Eleven, my friend and I were accosted by this charming young man and his pet. I'd had enough and pulled a folding knife from my pocket. I was tired of being picked on, and I knew they'd never fight fair. They ran right to the principal. I was suspended for a week, and so was Fireplug. I don't remember him messing with me afterward. At the end of grade 10, I transferred to a different school, learned some basic self-defense over the summer, and started at my new school with more confidence and a willingness to fight if need be. I never had to. My only advice to someone who's getting bullied is this: don't stop fighting back. Always fight back. A bully is looking for an easy target. Don't give him or her that. Story 11. In middle school, I was the quiet fat kid, and that experience taught me that middle schoolers can be downright evil. There was this one stuck-up cheerleader who pulled the classic mean girl routine almost daily, humiliating me and my few friends every chance she got. I grew to absolutely hate her. She was number one on my mental hit list, one I'd never actually act on, obviously. Fast forward 10 years. I've completely grown out of it. I'm at a healthy, average weight, decent looking, not a model, but definitely not bad either. And I've shed every bit of my old shyness through high school and college. One day, I'm walking out of my dentist's office, and guess who's sitting at the front desk? She didn't seem to recognize me. I looked completely different, but I recognized her instantly, though she had put on at least 100 pounds. I'm not exaggerating. She was huge, sitting there eating a large bag of Doritos while working, no less. After I paid and was about to leave, I looked at her and said, "I love karma, don't you?" She gave me a puzzled look. Maybe she figured it out later, maybe not. But in that moment, she had no idea who I was. And honestly, that was enough for me. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, activate the notification bell, and share a similar story or anything you'd like to say in the comments. See you next time.